Outrageous predictions for Ohio State against Purdue, 3:30 on Saturday. It's a big game. Didn't look like it was maybe going to be this big of a game at the start of the year, but Ohio State's had a couple rough weeks. Purdue is obviously trending up, having just beaten Michigan State and bumped into the college football playoff rankings. So these are our outrageous predictions for what is going to happen when these two teams play at Ohio Stadium. And I'm going to go first because we've done a lot this year picking sacks as one of the outrageous prediction things, and I'm afraid somebody else will do that also, so I'm going to do it before anybody else can. Purdue has allowed the third most sacks in the Big Ten. Only two teams have allowed more sacks than Purdue in the Big Ten. Even when you adjust it, though, because they attempt a lot of passes. They've attempted the most passes in the Big Ten. When you adjust for that, they're more middle of the pack. But Ohio State's obviously been on a tear recently. They lead the Big Ten in sacks. When you adjust that for how many pass attempts, kind of the rate, they're still right up there at the top with Wisconsin. Over the past 3 games, it's a 1 sack every 8.4 pass attempts for Ohio State. Past 4 games, 19 sacks in the past 4 games. So that would come out to an average of 5.3 sacks if you applied it to how many attempts per game Purdue has. Sorry for all the math. So I'm going to say 6 sacks for Ohio State on Saturday against this Purdue offense. I don't think Purdue has seen, I know, I mean, just looking at the numbers, they haven't seen other than Wisconsin, haven't seen a defense that can get to the quarterback this way. I think this defense is playing up front as well as it has all year. I think they may even come into this game with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder because people are going to be talking about George Karlaftis, and people like Tyreek Smith and Zach Harrison might be saying, what about me? So 6 sacks for Ohio State against a Purdue team that's going to throw the ball a lot. You're going to see high 40s, low 50s in attempts probably. Steven, what is your outrageous prediction?
I just don't know if yours is outrageous because we did this earlier in the year, and I think you picked 7 and I picked 8 or something like that. But I guess whatever works for you. Mine is, I think my outrageous predictions are headed in the downward spiral. They're getting less and less outrageous per week, but we have this tendency to talk to Coach Ryan Day and whoever we talk to about a certain topic throughout the week, and then it just comes to pass. We did it in 2019 with Justin Fields and interceptions, and then he basically told us we jinxed him, and then we're why he threw his first career interception against Michigan State. Well, we've been talking. The subject of the week has been C.J. Stroud running the ball, which he just doesn't do. And so my outrageous prediction is C.J. Stroud gets his second career rushing touchdown. His first obviously came in that Michigan State game when he had his first real extended time. And he had a 48-yard touchdown run, which is hilarious because him and Dwayne Haskins kind of got introduced to Ohio State football the same way with these crazy runs, and then they never ran again. But here, I'm going to say here, C.J. Stroud gets his first rushing touchdown of the season and his second of his career in this game.
Will it be another 48-yarder, or are we talking about more like a goal line play?
Definitely a goal line read option. They pulled out some option stuff last week. I think they pulled out another one in the goal line situation. And I'll say it's for 4 yards just to throw something on it.
Untouched, I bet. One of those, right, where it's everybody crashes on Travion.
They caught him off guard. Yep, for sure.
Could walk in on his hands if he wanted to.
Yes.
Everybody goes one way, he goes the other. Touchdown C.J. Stroud, says Steven Means. Doug Lesmerises, what is your outrageous prediction?
So I am introducing a new strategy to outrageous predictions, which is predict something outrageously, and then if it doesn't happen, just predict it again until it comes true. So I know on this podcast, I have predicted like a gigantic Garrett Wilson game, and then it didn't happen. And then he was out last week, and Jackson Smith and Jigba had a huge game. So I'm going to predict a giant Garrett Wilson game. Purdue is pretty good, like in raw stats and pass defense. Purdue is 15th in the country, giving up 185 passing yards per game. That is 3rd in the Big Ten. But as with much of this stuff that related to passing attacks in the Big Ten, it's like, well, because who have they played that can throw the ball? And they gave up 5 receptions for 120 yards to Avery Davis of Notre Dame in one of the games. And so I think we talked about this a lot, right? There's things with the slot in the Ohio State offense, work in the middle of the field. It felt like Nebraska, that's where Nebraska was going to give stuff up. CJ Stroud was smart to take it. Jackson Smith and Jigma goes crazy. Purdue's going to try to get after the passer, but maybe Purdue thinks, well, you know what? We can't just let that guy catch 15 passes for 200 yards in the middle of the field. Maybe we should clog up the middle of the field more, right? And Garrett Wilson is kind of the in-between guy. if Jackson's a little more inside, Chris Olave is a little more over the top. Garrett Wilson's kind of a little more in between. As I said last week, he might be their best player. He might be their most consistent, high-level guy, but he hasn't like exploded this year. I think he had 120 something one week. He's had 2 100-yard games this season. Last season, he started off the season with 4 straight. So I'll say 160 receiving yards for Garrett Wilson. It's like, I guess I can't go too far, but I don't think the Purdue pass defense numbers are necessarily real. George Karlaftis is real, but they're going to give up some stuff. And it might just, not that they're going to force feed Garrett Wilson, but he missed a game. If he's fine, and we have every reason to believe that he is, and Ryan Day said he'd be back and would be practicing this week and everything. Isn't it going to happen? Don't you think it's going to happen at some point? I mean, is Garrett Wilson just going to have 85 receiving yards in every game, or is he going to go bonkers one week? And maybe I'll just keep predicting it until it actually comes true.
I don't know. In some ways, Jackson Smith-Njigba is the one that maybe makes the most sense for a huge game because the way he operates in the middle of those zones, he can absorb a lot of those targets. I will say, Purdue, going back to those sack numbers, even with George Karlaftis, they get a sack every 15.9 attempts, which is like middle of the pack in the Big Ten, because a lot of teams stock up to kind of neutralize Karlaftis. I don't know if they have that second guy. So that's kind of what I think is part of the, can they get enough of a pass rush going to try to interrupt what Ohio State does as a passing offense? I think it's going to be kind of critical on Saturday.
Yeah, I think the biggest problem with Garrett is he's going to have an explosive play, right? He does that every week where the bulk of his yards come on like the 15-yard pass play that he takes for 40 yards because he's Garrett Wilson. And then he just doesn't do it again. Everything else he gets is routine because if Chris Olave is the deep guy, Jackson Smith-Njigba is more the short pass guy. He is the intermediate guy. So he doesn't get a lot of opportunities to maybe get as explosive as he was last year. But yeah, I think he is due. He's due for a Garrett Wilson game. And we'll say that next week if it doesn't happen this week.
He is. He's 30th in the nation in receiving yards per game at 85.9 right now. 30th.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some of that is just matchup dependent. Who's the guy that they can pick on that week, or who that Ohio State feels like he can pick on that week? And I don't think that Purdue goes 3 deep with guys that they have to worry about in the secondary, but we will find out on Saturday. Get the texts 614-350-3315. We will be texting you from Ohio Stadium, letting you know what we see from Garrett Wilson, what we see from the guys on the Ohio State defensive line before that game starts.